Robbie Williams Rewind.
Welcome to Robbie Williams Rewind. We are the champions. I'm Matt.
And I'm Lucy.
And along with help from special guests, we take you on an in-depth rewind through the solo career of multi-award-winning singer, songwriter and entertainer Robbie Williams.
We've got a bit of a different episode for you all today. We loved watching the BBC's Boybands Forever documentary that Robbie was a part of. It was a great show, but it was really sad hearing about the negative sides of what most of the boy bands went through. It also featured members of E17, Five, Damage, 911, Blue and Westlife, as well as many of their respective managers, including Simon Cowell. They each discussed their rise to fame, but more importantly how it affected their mental health and left some of them with no money at the end.
And there's one 90s boy band member who's been discussing this topic and more with other pop stars on his own YouTube channel, The Accidental Popstar, for 2 years. So we're thrilled today to be joined by Ally Begg from Bad Boys Inc. To hear about his boy band experience, as well as some memories of meeting and seeing Rob live many times. Hi Ally, welcome to the show.
Hi guys, thank you so much for having me on. Delighted to be here.
Oh.
We're very glad to have you.
Thank you.
So here's some backstory for those who may not be familiar with Bad Boys Inc. You and your three bandmates, Matthew Pateman, Tony Dowding and David Ross, had 6 UK top 40 singles, including one that was top 10, and a top 20 album in 1993 to 1994, before splitting in 1995. I was a fan. I saw you live a few times in a little nightclub near me and at a couple of road shows. So interviewing you today is a bit surreal.
So relating your story back to Robbie, seeing this as a podcast about him, Bad Boys Inc. were put together by one of Take That's early producers, Ian Levine. Ian and another producer, Billy Griffin, produced Take That's third single, Once You've Tasted Love, and then supposedly that encouraged them to release a cover as their next single to get a hit, which was Only Takes a Minute.
Yeah.
Ian and Billy then wrote I Found Heaven and produced A Million Love Songs and the original Take That and party version of Could It Be Magic. But apparently Take That fell out with Ian during the recording of I Found Heaven and requested that they not write or record with him again. So Ian created Bad Boys Inc. to rival Take That, meaning that he had his own boy band to sing the songs he'd written and produced. Does that sound about right, Ally?
Absolutely spot on. I actually had no idea until a newspaper article came out about 3 or 4 months after we actually became a band. And if I had known that that was his intentions, I think our thinking might have been completely different to work with him. From what I understand, and this is just my individual understanding, is that the album that he had produced for us was actually earmarked for Take That. So when we got together, it was quite a surreal time in my life. I'll never forget the audition. I went down to his studio, and his studio, believe it or not, was actually on the same street where I lived in Chiswick in London. Oh. So I just jumped on the bus and went down the road, went into his studio, met him. And when I came out, I remember going to the nearest phone box, calling my dad and saying to him, I'm just as confused now to what I was before I went in, and I have no idea what this guy wants. I thought he was auditioning me to be in a music video. I genuinely had no idea that he was auditioning me to actually become a member of a boy band. And the penny only dropped in my second audition when he told me, I want you to be a member of a boy band. So it was totally bizarre. It literally happened overnight. But the whole connection with Take That, I knew there was something to do with Take That because there were awards up on his walls. There were these, the old records that producers get and artists get for selling so many records. There was 1 or 2 of them up on the wall. But to be honest with you, I was never into pop music, so I didn't really know who Take That were at the time. Right. But it was only after that we got together that all of this really came out in the wash, that this was one of the main reasons why he put us together.
Right, I see. So what did you actually think about the music that he was making you sing?
Well, again, it's just a personal thought, but I wasn't a fan of it because I never liked bubblegum pop music. I could see what he was trying to do. I had quite a diverse mix of music when I was growing up. And I never really made this public when people asked me about my musical influences because I genuinely didn't believe that people would believe me. So when I was really young, and I remember moving to Aberdeen, because we moved to Aberdeen from Holland, and immediately I fell myself into liking bands like the Cult, the Sex Pistols, the Jam, these type of bands. And I was still only 8, 9, 10 years old and loving the Sex Pistols at the age of 10. The Sex Pistols album was the third album that I ever bought in my life. And my mum made me take it back to the shop and get a refund.
Oh, no.
She was absolutely distraught that I had bought a Sex Pistols album. So I really wasn't into to pop music at all. You know, I was, as I said, Sex Pistols, The Clash. These were the type of bands that I was into. Madness, The Specials. So my music was completely diverse.
Right. Because your album does have quite a sound that was similar to Take That's records that Ian had produced.
Yeah.
You know, when you listen to some of the songs, it's like, oh, that sounds like the beginning of I Found Heaven.
Yeah, I completely agree with you. And it was something that we as a foursome had become quite conscious of quite early, because there was obviously going to be that natural tie-in with Take That, because Ian was now producing us and Billy Griffin was now doing the backing vocals on the records as well. So if you listen to Don't Talk About Love and then you listen to Walking on Air and then you compare it to Could It Be Magic or I Found Heaven, the backing vocals are exactly the same.
Yeah.
And I was hugely uncomfortable with that. Even from day one, it was something that really troubled me and really bothered me, because I felt that we needed our own individual sound. And the press jumped on that quite quickly. And I almost pleaded with Ian Levine to have a completely different sound in the background, backing vocalists. And he just wasn't for doing it. He wouldn't listen to us. So at the end of the day, because I was given such an opportunity, it was important for me to remain humble, keep my feet on the ground, be very grateful for the opportunity that I was given, considering that I was plucked from obscurity and given this opportunity, which had the potential to be life-changing. So I remained quite humble about it all. In hindsight, which is obviously a great thing, I should have stood up more, because there were knock-on effects which affected me personally going forward.
Right.
Yeah. And I guess you said you never really thought about being in a boy band, because I think you were modelling before and you went to the audition and then suddenly you were in a boy band. So I guess there was little preparation that you could have done, because it happened, I guess, hence the accidental Popstar channel that you run.
Yeah, because it happened so quickly, I didn't really have time to think about it. I was literally thrown in, as were Matthew, David and Tony. Okay, we had an original lead singer, a chap called Richard, that didn't work out. And we auditioned Matt, and Matt came in about 4 or 5 months later. And then obviously it worked once Matt came in. But at the time, which was the autumn 1992, when I first auditioned, I'd been with Models One in London for about a year. And my career with Models One was really starting to take off after quite a slow start. So I was doing really well at the time. I was getting great jobs. I was earning decent money. I was very much on my own 2 feet. I didn't need to rely on my parents anymore, who had been incredibly supportive since I moved to London. So joining a boy band was the last thing I was thinking about at the time. And I remember in the audition, he said to me, "Can you sing?" And I'm just like, no, of course not. the only level of singing I've ever done is at football matches. And he said, can you dance? I said, well, I can dance. Dancing will not be a problem because I love dancing. I was right into dancing.
Yeah.
So I knew that I had no fears with that. But the singing was a real concern for me. And again, from early days, when he brought in session singers to do our backing vocals, it really, for me, it was the worst thing that could have happened, because all it did was made me feel like a fraud. And that was one of the major issues going forward, for me personally anyway.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And we'll come on to talk about that a little bit more. Won't we?
Yeah. So you worked your way up in much the same way as Take That did, doing schools, under 18 clubs, over 18 clubs, and worked yourselves ragged. How did you cope with the long hours and the exhaustion of it all?
Honestly, it was non-stop. I found an itinerary of ours. I moved house recently. I was just clearing out and found an itinerary where we did 6 gigs in one day, starting at 3 o'clock in the afternoon in a school, and then progressively working our way to another school, to a university, an under 18 club, and then actually finishing off by doing 2 gigs really late at night. I think our last gig was at about 11 o'clock at night up in Newcastle. And I just looked at it, and this was the norm for us. So it became a daily routine, and it was exhausting. I'll never forget one time we drove all the way to Newcastle. We'd done a television show in the morning. We met at our manager's office after having a meeting, jumped in the van, drove all the way to Newcastle. We were really excited about doing the gig because we always got fantastic support in Newcastle, and our gigs were always sold out. And we got there, and to our horror, there was nobody outside the gig. And normally, we'd be met by hundreds of screaming fans. There was nobody there. And I was like, oh my God, what's happened here? Is our popularity just gone all of a sudden up here? Why is there nobody here? And I remember our tour manager said to us, stay here. He says, let me just go into the club. So he knocks on the door of the club. He goes in, he disappears for about 10 minutes, and he comes back, and he's totally white ashen. His face is just totally white. And he went, you're not going to believe this. The gig's tomorrow. We drove all the way to Newcastle on the wrong day. And the thing is, we had to drive all the way back again because we had a photo shoot the very next morning. So we had no choice but to go all the way back down. Now, we did that for probably the first year, where we were able to build our fan base. And then once the record started charting, we didn't really have to do as many gigs, but we were also very conscious that we wanted to continue doing them. But we were very lucky that at that point we could start to pick and choose.
Right.
But the whole premise about doing these gigs is to build a fan base. That was the thinking behind it all. And I would recommend any band to follow that path, because you do get out there, you do expose yourself to many, many people. And if they like you, if they like the music, and if they like you visually, they're going to jump on board naturally. And I think that's how we were able to build our fan base quite quickly, because we were so busy. What we found really interesting, particularly myself, because I always kept an eye on how we were progressing. It was very important to me how we were progressing. And what I found in the early days, you would get half a dozen to a dozen turn up. And then you would get 20 to 30 turning up. And then you would get 50 to 100. And then all of a sudden it would just boom, where you were selling gigs out at nightclubs that could fit 2,500 people inside. So the progression for me was quite obvious. Where I felt we were getting let down was musically. I always felt that our style of music didn't fit the style of the band. And it was so fascinating to see us selling out gigs, but yet not sell many records. And I think that is probably what was the downfall of Bad Boys Inc. in the end, was that people loved us visually. They loved coming to our shows. They loved what we did live, but they were maybe in two minds about buying our records.
Yeah.
And for me, when you look at the bands that were up and coming in and around our time, which was Boyzone and Backstreet Boys, who were very much in the background, but that we'd become aware of. And I remember sitting on the back of a tour bus with Ronan Keating, and he gave me a listen to his album. And I remember getting into the hotel and saying to the boys, we're done. We're absolutely done. Forget it. Absolutely forget it. Unless we change, we're going to go down a very dangerous, slippery road here. So as much as visually and an image can sell a band, at the end of the day, it's the music that sells the band. It's the music that makes you a success. And I just felt that we were too image driven.
Yeah.
And something that you ask all of your guests on your show is whether anyone ever sat them down and said, this is what's going to happen and this is what things are going to be like when you're famous. Do you think it's possible for anyone to even comprehend what being famous is like, for them to be able to explain it or warn you in advance and how to deal with it?
In hindsight, probably not. But what I would have liked to have done is just, for say one of our managers' acts or one of the record company's acts, to have maybe sat us down and just talked us through what to expect, because I genuinely had no idea what to expect. And it was a little bit scary because all of a sudden your life does change, and our lives literally changed overnight. And nobody prepared us for that. Newspaper articles all of a sudden started appearing, particularly back home in Scotland, which again, I wasn't ready for and I wasn't expecting. And I had to deal with it. And the only way I was dealing with it was by learning. And I just wish folk had sat us down and said, if a journalist asks you this question, this is how you should respond. If a journalist says to you, this is off the record, it's not off the record. Nothing is off the record. So do not think that just because they say that, that gives you the freedom to say anything you want. Because I got caught out once when somebody said to me, this is off the record. And I said something which I shouldn't have done. And it had an impact on not just me, but my girlfriend at the time. So looking back, I think in these type of situations, there needs to be more of a duty of care. And I never felt there was enough duty of care from particularly the management company to almost protect us. Because we were literally thrown in. We were thrown in at the deep end, and it was sink or swim. And I think if we'd been a little bit more prepared, I think we as four very young lads would have been able to cope with what was coming our way an awful lot better.
Yeah. And you've spoken about how important it was for the four of you to be a tight-knit group in order to survive the fame and the craziness.
Yeah.
Do you empathise with Rob when he talks about the divisions within Take That and their manager, and what do you think, when you heard about him quitting the band?
I sympathise completely. I knew exactly what he was going through. To be fair, I didn't understand the level of darkness that he fell into, and the remedies that he turned to be able to cope with that. And I read a lot of stories about pop stars from boy bands who turn to drugs or who turn to alcohol in a means of being able to cope with what's coming their way. Thankfully, I never went down that route. I didn't need to. I was never into drugs. I was never a drinker. I'm not a drinker. So I never felt that I needed to turn to something to be able to cope. What I did was I dug deep into my own soul to be able to cope with everything. But when divisions happen, and I think we were quite lucky, there wasn't a very, how can I put this? There wasn't an obvious gulf between me, David, Matthew, and Tony. Anything but. There was a time when it felt more like Matthew and David and Ally and Tony. But that's only because Tony and I shared a room. We would sit next to each other on the bus. But that didn't mean to say there was a division. It's just I enjoyed Tony's company probably more than I enjoyed Matthew or David's company. Not that I didn't, because I didn't. But Tony and I had more in common. Football, for a start. Modelling, another one. But Matthew and David's sense of humour was something that I was very attracted to. They have a wicked sense of, and I don't mean wicked, I mean as in wicked, yeah.
Right.
Like they would make fun out of people and all that kind of stuff, almost like a dark humor. And I really enjoyed that from them. Honestly, the two of them were like a double act, and they were so funny, and they would keep us going for hours, particularly on the bus. They would just keep us going for hours. And, Matthew is now one of my closest friends. Unfortunately, I haven't spoken to David or Tony for a number of years now. But Matthew is still one of my closest friends, and we talk very regularly. And I went to see him when I was back in London in May. So I do empathize with what happened to Robbie, because I understand, because I was there myself. Yeah. And I can understand why divisions can be created. One of the things that used to really annoy me was it was almost like there was a competition to be who was the most popular member of the band. Mm. And I couldn't understand why this atmosphere was almost created. It's like, who cares who's the most popular member of the band? It's irrelevant. It doesn't matter. At the end of the day, what mattered was us as a unit, mm-hmm. looking after each other and how successful we could be going forward. And where I'm really, really proud of the boys is that we worked tirelessly to try and make Bad Boys Inc. a success, because we knew that behind the scenes, from a musical point of view, we were up against it.
Yeah.
So we doubled our efforts. David, Tony, and I spent hours with vocal coaches trying to develop a voice that was going to be good enough to be able to sing live, to be able to sing a cappella, and to be able to perform on records in a studio. So it was absolutely vital that the four of us remained as strong as we possibly could. And it's something that I'm very proud of that we did, that we achieved that the four of us were very, very strong together, because we did really look out for each other. We really did.
That's quite kind of rare to hear in boy bands.
Yeah, I think so. But I think we were switched on, and I'm not suggesting for 1 minute that other boy bands weren't, but we were very conscious of looking after each other. And I think there was an element where we genuinely cared for each other, and we wanted to be the very best that we could. Mm. We had a stylist who eventually came in, who became a really good friend of ours, and he styled us. And we were allowed an input into how we looked. And the four of us, we really worked on our image, and we really worked on our stage presence. And I swear to you, the hardest I've ever worked is with a vocal coach and in the dance studio. When we went into the dance studio, we worked 8-9 hours a day on our routines. If we had a day off from doing photo shoots or gigging or meetings or whatever, we would arrange to go to the dance studio. We would say to our management company, can you please find us a slot and get us into the dance studio? And we worked so hard to make sure that when people came to our gigs, that we absolutely blew them away. Mm-hmm. That they came away going, wow, that was actually really, really good. And when I look back on television shows that I've never seen before, that fans now send me clips of shows that I've never seen before. And I'm just like, I text Matthew the other day, a guy sent a clipping of a television show that I have absolutely no recollection of doing whatsoever. And it was our last single, and I think it was one of our last ever performances. And I text Matthew and I said to him, do you know what? I said, I'm not blowing smoke up our own backsides, but mate, we were good. This is a really polished performance. We're tight. We're on time. We look good. And I felt proud about that. I felt really quite proud about that.
Yeah, that's good. So you know how crazy the hysteria and lifestyle felt to you. What was it like to receive negative comments from random members of the public? And can you imagine what it felt like for Rob at the height of his fame when he was being called the fat dancer from Take That?
Yeah. I thank God that social media wasn't around when we were around, because I don't know how I would have coped. I used to get hate mail. My parents used to get hate mail. And I know it was something that they found extremely difficult to cope with. And I said to both of them, if it comes, put it in the bin immediately. Mm-hmm. Don't open it. Don't read it. Put it in the bin. And again, this is where I felt there needed to be more of a care of duty from our record company and our management company, because we didn't know how to cope with this.
Yeah.
And I felt that, again, we were almost left on our own to deal with it. Again, learning on the job. And yes, there are aspects of being in a boy band where you have to learn on the job, but there are other aspects where you do need help and you need guidance. And there was never any guidance when it came to the negativity. If I can tell you a quick story about, and it is related to negativity, and it's something I became very conscious of with the people who were around us. So we did the Des O'Connor show in just before Christmas, 1993. And we were doing Walking on Air. And Matthew had to do a live vocal. And I don't know what happened that day, but the four of us were just not on it. We were all over the shop. We did 2 or 3 rehearsals. We did a dress rehearsal. Matthew just couldn't get his vocals going. We couldn't get our routine going. We were dreadful. It was probably our worst ever television performance. And we came to do the live show, and we were dreadful. And I'm still to this day hugely embarrassed by our performance that day. And I remember getting back into the dressing room, and the four of us were distraught. We were absolutely distraught. And a member of our management team came in and went, "Well done, guys. That was fantastic. It was brilliant. Oh, you did so well." And I'm just like, why would you say that? Because you know that we sucked, that we were awful. So why would you say that?
Yeah.
Tell us how it is. Tell us that we were awful. And then literally a couple of minutes later, Des O'Connor came in himself, thanked us for coming on the show. And as he walked out, he grabbed me by the arm. He put his arm around me, and he just whispered into my ear, "Work harder." That's all I'm going to say to you. Work harder.
Yeah.
And that stayed with me, because he knew that we hadn't put on a very good performance that night. You could feel it from the audience.
Right.
And it was a really, really difficult moment for us. And the criticism that came our way after the show went on air was quite telling. But I was like, we have to take this on the chin, because we were awful and we have to learn from it. But when you get into the privacy of your own home, that's when it gets really difficult, because all of a sudden you've got nobody to bounce off. Yeah. You've got nobody to take the mick out of. And that's where I found it personally quite difficult, is when I got home and I didn't have the lads to bounce off, that it started to eat away at me about, we're not as good as we think we are. And we've still got an awful lot of work to do to improve. So it was hard, really hard. Yeah. But to be honest with you, you learn over time that you have to do your best to let it go, to not let it bother you. I was given a great piece of advice by a friend of mine who was a professional football player at the time. And he said to me, "Do not read the newspapers. Don't read them, good or bad." He says, "Just don't read them." He says, "Because all it'll do is just mess with your head." Yeah. He says, "So just put them in the bin." And that's what I did. I didn't read anything, be it good or be it bad. I never read reviews. I never read interviews from magazines. Whenever we did magazine interviews or photo shoots, I never looked at them. I wasn't interested. I just, for me, that was the dark side of being in the public eye. So I fully sympathize with why Rob found it difficult, because when you start having a go at you for your physical appearance, that's not cool. No. It's really not cool. Yeah. I can handle people saying to me, "Oh, you were awful tonight." But if people would say to me, "You look fat," or "You've put on weight," or "You've got spots on your face," that's like, come on, is that really necessary?
Yeah.
So, fair play to Rob, because he came through it. Yeah. And at the end of the day, he's had the last laugh, hasn't he?
Yeah, exactly.
including writing the song Fat Popstar,
Yeah.
where he came out in a giant fat suit. Just, yeah, I love that.
Hi, I'm Robbie Williams, and you're listening to Robbie Williams Rewind with the Champions.
This is a linked question in a way, and I'm sure we'll move on to positive things in a moment. But thanks for being so candid and so honest, and sharing your experiences. But you've also talked a little bit about imposter syndrome before, which Rob's talked a lot about and still does actually. Yeah. Do you think that's common for performers, and what's your sort of thoughts on that?
I can't speak for other performers, but and I do find it slightly bewildering that Rob says that, because I always thought Rob was absolutely fantastic, and I thought he was the standout character in Take That for me. When I first saw Could It Be Magic, I was immediately drawn to Rob. Yeah. First, because of his voice. Secondly, because of the way he looked. And thirdly, because of the presence that he had. Mm-hmm. And so when he said that he suffered from this, I was a little bit baffled by it all, because he doesn't deserve to feel that way, because he is a fantastic talent. He's a hugely talented lad. I suffered from it because I wasn't. And that's not just me trying to play the sympathy card here. I wasn't talented. I couldn't sing. Okay, I could dance a bit. I had an image, and I had to really dig deep to understand this is the reason why I'm here, is because of my image. It's not because I can sing. It's not because I'm a sensational dancer. It's because I have an image which suited the way that Ian Levine wanted the band to look. And I almost found that quite difficult, because I didn't want my image just to be the reason why I was in a pop group. And that's why, again, I come back to doubling the efforts in the dance studios and doubling the efforts to be able to sing. And again, it's something I'm really proud of, is that we did achieve that we actually became really quite good singers. And we took so many people by surprise when we were able to sing a cappella in radio gigs, or go and sing live at record signings or whatever. It blew people away because they genuinely didn't think that we could sing.
Yeah.
So for many, many months, because I was placed in a situation where there are millions of people out there who would give their left arm to be given one chance of getting a record deal. And I was literally plucked off the street and given that chance. I found that very, very difficult. And if I can use my ex-girlfriend as an example, my ex-girlfriend she became a professional dancer and is now a very successful choreographer. She was a hugely talented individual who went to a performing arts school in Chiswick. And I was in awe of this girl. It's one of the reasons why I fell in love with her, because she was absolutely incredible. What a performer she was. And she worked so hard to be given an opportunity to perform in the West End. That was her dream. That was her goal, was to perform on the stage in the West End. And then all of a sudden I come along, and, we dated for about a year. And then all of a sudden I become a pop star, and I never had to work for it. It was literally handed to me on a plate. Yeah. And as much as she was delighted for me, and as much as she was proud of me, there must have been a side to her that thought, how can you just get given this?
Yeah.
You've just literally been handed it, and I'm working so hard to be given one tiny little opportunity. So that started to trouble me as well, was that there were so many people out there that desperately wanted that opportunity. And I knew there were millions of people who were far more talented than I could ever dream of being. And it really started to eat away at me. And I kept saying to the lads, we've got to sing. We've got to be the very best that we can be all the time, to the point where I think I drove the lads absolutely insane with my, almost like a style of management, trying to manage them. Yeah. And, to their great credit, they they tolerated me, they put up with me, and I would like to think that they were on board with me, because I keep coming back to it. We worked so hard, but I personally found it very, very difficult, because I felt like a fraud. I really did. I still suffer from it today. I'm sitting here talking to you guys, and as comfortable as I am talking to you, I'm still thinking, my God, I was a fraud. I was just a fraud. And I tell you, the one thing that played in the back of my mind was, it hadn't been that long since Milli Vanilli had been caught out. Mm-hmm. It really hadn't been that long. Yeah. And I remember the absolute mayhem that was caused around those poor guys. And it was something that it just niggled. I never said anything publicly. I never said anything to the producer. I never said anything to the boys, but it niggled me at the back that we could be another Milli Vanilli.
Yeah.
And that's why it was important for me to work hard.
Mm-hmm.
What an incredible work ethic you've got there. I mean, I work in the corporate world, which is very different to the entertainment and music world, but a lot of us still have those feelings of the imposter. You know, you get promoted into a role over somebody else. Why did that happen?
Yeah.
But yeah, like you say, you have to double down and focus and develop. And, you know, I talk to a lot of my colleagues about lifelong learning. You know, you don't ever really finish learning. And I think that's the same in any field that you're in. And so it's incredible to hear your work ethic. I'm assuming you probably took that into your football career as well, by the sounds of it.
Yeah, I've always had a very strong work ethic. At the end of the day, I've always had the attitude that whether I was modeling, whether I was trying to be a professional football player, whether I was making my way in sports broadcasting, the DNA always remained the same. It was working hard. And I always tried to better myself, no matter what I was doing. I always wanted to be the very best that I could be. Even now, you know, I've just gone through a life-changing illness. I've gone through a divorce, all at the same time, which completely threw me. And I'm having to start again at the age of 52. But my DNA, in terms of my work ethic, has not changed. It's like, okay, so I've gone through it, I've come through it, and now I have to go again. So I have to use what I've used over the past 30 years to be able to get me to the level that I want to be at now, which is hard work, which is believing in myself and cracking on. And I think if you work hard in life, you're going to get the benefits, you're going to get the rewards. And you also get, I think you should also allow yourself a little bit of self-satisfaction. You know, I recently I completed a PR and communications module that I went through because I quite fancy stepping into it. And when I finished my assignment, I allowed myself a pat on the back. I allowed myself to say, do you know what? You've done really well here. Allow yourself a wee pat on the back.
Yeah.
But tomorrow we go again.
Yeah.
Yes.
Does that make sense?
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
So whose decision was it to end Bad Boys Inc.?
So I decided to leave. I basically had enough. It's very complicated, and I don't really want to go into the complications of it because I'll just bore you to tears. But basically, to cut a long story short, I did not want to go down the route of working with Ian Levine again.
Okay.
I felt that because there were bands like Boyzone, Backstreet Boys, particularly Backstreet Boys, who scared the living crap out of me because I knew how good they were and I knew how fantastic their sound was.
Yeah.
That if we had continued to go down the route of Ian Levine's productions, we would, it's just a personal opinion, but I think we would have crashed and burned. So I felt when we got told that we would not be working with other producers, that the band had had its time.
Yeah.
I also felt that at the time, we were probably at our most popular. We were still winning awards. We were still very popular with the industry, as in the media within the industry. We were still very popular when it came to booking us for television shows. We were still selling out gigs. We were still selling records, not as many as we hoped, but we were still selling records. And I just felt, if I leave when I think we're at our best, I think that's the right thing to do. Because if we split up when we're coming down the other way, I think it's going to be an awful lot harder to deal with.
Yeah.
So I took the decision that I wanted to leave. It wasn't an easy decision. It was very difficult because there were offers on the table, but I just had enough. I really did. I wasn't enjoying it anymore. I was sick and tired of answering the same old questions every time. What's your favorite color? Do you like Take That? It's like, I've had 3 years of it, guys. Just can we try and come up with something a little bit more original than asking me what my favorite color is? And it just became a bit monotonous for me. And I don't mean this to sound ungrateful or arrogant, because I was extremely grateful. It took me a long time to understand how grateful I was for the opportunity. And I really look back and go, wow, mate, honestly, you were one lucky boy. And I know that now, and I can appreciate that now more than what I could say. Even as long ago as 10 years ago, I didn't appreciate it. I now really, really do. And I appreciate those who have continued to keep an eye on us as four lads, as in our fan base, who have followed us for 30 years since. I know social media has helped greatly by that, but the fact that our fans still take a genuine interest in what we do now, for me, is incredibly humbling, and it's incredibly flattering. And that's now what I really take from my time in the band, is that, do you know what? As hard as it was and as disappointed as I was with it all, we actually gave an awful lot of people a really, really good time. And for me, that's the most important thing. And again, that only became aware to me when I was quite negative about the band and I was quite negative about the experience. And I thought to myself, I mustn't be like this anymore. I've got to take the positives from it. And I've got to remember that we did give thousands of people a really, really good time. And that a lot of people bought our records and came to watch us at gigs and invested their time in us, and not just their time, but their money as well. And that's where now I think, do you know what? My God, I was one lucky boy, lived the dream, got to travel all over the world, met some incredible people, performed in front of hundreds of thousands of screaming fans. Just absolutely unbelievable. And now I'm really, really comfortable in my own skin about it.
Good. I think when you left the band, though, you kind of ended up in some, you basically had no money. Yeah. Is that right? And you had a kind of lack of confidence as well. How long did it take you to recover after the band and sort of get back to feeling
I'm still recovering now.
Yeah.
It was very difficult after we decided to go our separate ways. I left and then the boys decided that was it after that. And it took months to be able to really start the process of healing and going again, because I genuinely didn't know what to do. I didn't care for the fame, so I didn't want to stay famous. I couldn't care less about that. I was never interested in fame. I was never interested in being a celebrity. That was not in my DNA. Yeah. In fact, I found the whole fame game completely unnecessary, and I found it uncomfortable, if I'm being honest. Flattering, but uncomfortable. So I was quite happy to step away from all of that. And people were kind of pushing me. Like I had a couple of agents who were kind of pushing me towards television presenting, youth magazine type of roles, all that kind of stuff. But I thought, no, because this is not me. This will be me stepping into another role where I'm going to feel like an imposter. I'm going to feel like a fraud, and I'm going to be doing something that I know deep down is not me. But I was also becoming very conscious that I had a mortgage to pay for. I had bills to pay for. I had debts that were mounting up, and I needed to be able to start making a living again. And the best thing that I ever did was swallow my pride and get myself a little job in a private gym in a hotel just outside London. Mm-hmm. It was the best thing I ever did because it gave me back my confidence. I was back earning money. I was able to put food on my own table. I was able to pay my bills. I was able to put petrol in the car. And I was able to interact with people again. And what I loved about the people who were the members of this club was that not one of them judged me for being in a boy band. I was just a member of staff who was there working in this club to make sure that they had the best couple of hours in the club that they could possibly have, be it going for a swim, going for a sauna, going into the gym. And I loved it there. I was there for nearly 3 years, give or take. And it gave me back my confidence. It gave me back a purpose. I went away and I studied. I got qualifications for the industry and it was great. And there were times when folk would come in and they would recognize me. And in fact, this is where Robbie actually played a small part in my recovery. Am I allowed to use bad language?
Yes.
Yeah. Okay. Just to give you context for the story. So I remember one of the first times that I met Rob, and we were talking about people having a go at us and all that kind of stuff. And he said to me, I'm going to give you a line. He says, if anybody has a go at you, just say to them, oh, I'm sorry. You must have me confused with someone who gives a fuck what you think about. And I used that at least a dozen occasions over a 3-year period in the gym where people would come in, and I never, ever forgot it. The first time somebody came in, and she was the friend of one of our beauticians, and she recognized me immediately and she went, oh my God, what a fall from grace. And I just said to her over the counter, oh, I'm sorry. You must have me confused with someone who gives a shit what you think. And that immediately shut her down. She kind of went away a little bit sheepish. And I had to use it on more than one occasion. And it worked every single time. And Rob gave me that line. And I'll even today, I still use it today. And I've never forgotten him telling me that. And I thank him for giving me that line because it worked a treat every single time. But getting that job in the gym was amazing. And then that job in the gym led me obviously to getting into TV.
Right.
And we're going to come back to the other things that you've done in your career since.
Yeah.
But while we're on the subject of Robbie, can we delve into a few of your Robbie memories?
Yeah.
Maybe. So I love that, by the way. That definitely sounds like Robbie, what you've just said. and I think he's been on record of talking about the fact that people, for some reason, people think that when you're in the public eye, when you're famous, when you're a celebrity, that actually you're bulletproof and people can just say stuff to you and it just washes off, and it doesn't. You're a human being like everybody else, and you're not equipped for people just criticizing you day in, day out. You know, it's not what we should do as human beings, but some people think it's okay to do that. But so we all should remember that line.
Yeah. Yeah. Can you remember the first time you actually saw Take That, or the first time you met Robbie?
Oh yes. So again, I'm going to have to use bad language, so please forgive me. Okay. So it was the Smash Hits Poll Winners Party 1993 at Wembley Arena.
Yeah.
And we had been told in advance that we had won the Best Newcomers Award. So we had to do our rehearsal. So we got up on stage and we did a rehearsal. Then we got asked to do it again. And the boys from Take That came round to the front and sat about 4 or 5 rows back and watched us. And I remember Robbie getting up in the middle of the aisle and almost taking the mick out of us.
Oh no.
And I clocked him and shouted at him from stage. I told him to fuck off.
Brilliant. Well done, you.
Very loudly. Subsequently got told off. And we finished the rehearsal. And fast forward, we had to do something else where we had to gather on stage. And we all walked off stage together. And Rob was the only one that made any effort to come and talk to us. That's a lie. Rob and Howard were the only ones that made any sort of effort to come and talk to us. And I don't think this now, but at the time I thought the other three were a little bit obtuse. I get it, I understand it, but I thought it was a little bit unnecessary. But the fact that Rob and Howard made the effort to come and talk to us, I thought was actually very, very nice. So that was my first memory of meeting Robbie. And I came away with a sort of a newfound respect for them, because we went and watched them rehearse. I remember saying to the boys, we're nowhere near their level, nowhere near it. And again, that whole sort of working hard ethic, it kicked in quite early, because they were good. They were really good. And what a presence they had on stage.
Yeah.
And if I remember correctly, I think the performance was Relight My Fire with Lulu. So yeah, they were miles ahead of us. Oh my God.
And did you ever talk to any of them about the craziness of pop star life?
No. The only time that I was able, I didn't speak to the four boys. The only time I ever spoke to any of the lads from Take That was with Rob. So we met at the Smash Hits Paul Winners party, and then fast forward about a year, I got invited onto a show called the Crystal Rose Show, which was a daytime television program. And it was filmed in the ITV London studios. And I was there on my own. And I think, again, if my memory serves me correct, I think the boys were filming the Cilla Black show. The Take That lads were filming the Cilla Black show at the time. And Robbie clocked me and came over. We were in the canteen and he came over, and the two of us sat and had a cup of tea, and we just chatted away. We mainly chatted about Ian Levine, the producer, and he does a fantastic impression of Ian Levine, which had me doubled up. And he was, I have to say, he was very complimentary about us, and I was quite surprised by that. And again, he just spoke about working hard, trying to be careful with the fame game, and trying to stay together as a unit, because I kind of sensed from him that there was an issue with the other boys. I didn't bring it up, and I certainly didn't say anything publicly at the time, but I just sensed something, because I wondered why he was there on his own. Why was he in the canteen on his own?
Yeah.
You know, why was he not in the dressing room with the other boys? And that kind of has always stayed with me. I've always wondered why he was on his own in the canteen. But he came over, and, you know, we had about 20 minutes together or so, and he was fantastic. He was absolutely lovely. I didn't know what to expect, but he was great. Honestly, he was absolutely fantastic. And I can't speak highly enough of him. I really can't, because obviously I've met him subsequently. And he's been brand new every time. Every time I've met him, he's been absolutely brand new.
Yeah.
Sorry, brand new is a very Scottish terminology.
I was thinking that when you said it.
Brand new is like, he's fantastic, he's great.
Get it?
Yeah. So you said that one of your friends was Robbie's bodyguard when he first went solo. So
That's
you ended
right.
up seeing Robbie a few times live in London.
That's
I guess
right.
it was London.
Yeah.
What gigs were those?
So he did a couple of private gigs to start with, and then he did a couple of rehearsal gigs. So I got invited to all of these gigs, basically. The rehearsal gig was in preparation for when he first went out on tour. And then I got invited to a venue somewhere in Hammersmith. I can't remember where the venue was, but that was his first gig in front of a live sort of audience, let's say. So I got invited to that as well. So the guy who was our bodyguard, a gentleman called Paul Dallanegra, his twin brother, Ricky, was Robbie's personal bodyguard.
Right.
And I was very, very tight with Paul and Ricky. I still am to this day. The two of them are still my closest friends. So Ricky got the job working with Rob, and he would call me, because I lived, the first gig, if I remember correctly, it was somewhere in North London. I can't remember exactly the venue. But it was basically a rehearsal to do the live shows. So Rick invited me along, went along, met Rob again, told him about what had happened to us, because he was genuinely quite interested. Asked him how he was doing, just the normal kind of stuff, almost like looking out for each other. Then he did the gig, and I swear to God, he blew me away. I was like, holy crap, how good are you? There were times when I was like, you need to reel yourself in a little bit. He was almost like too excitable.
Yeah.
But he was amazing. And he did this cover version of, what's that song called? Back for Good? Take that?
Yeah, Back for Good, yeah, where he rocks it up.
Oh,
yeah, it's so good.
Like, this is awesome. I love this. It's almost like a tongue-in-cheek version, yeah? Mm-hmm. But I loved it. And I loved that he had the brass neck to do it. That's what I really liked about Rob. It was almost like he had no fear, yeah?
Yeah.
And then he sang Angels. And I remember turning to Ricky and going, holy crap, that is beautiful. And I remember saying to him, just out of interest, what's your first single? What's your solo single, your debut single? And he told me the one by George Michael. And I was like, really? I said, that one that you just did, that ballad, mate, that's got to be your first single, surely, to Christ. And I just remember having that conversation with him because it was phenomenal. And the gig was brilliant. And I thought, he was absolutely fantastic. And then I saw him in Watford doing a gig. And this was just after I got my contract with Manchester United Television. So I was sort of stepping now into television. And I just got my first tattoo done. And he'd seen my tattoo and we'd started comparing and talking about tattoos. That's how we were able to open the conversation. And then I told him that I'd got this job at Manchester United. And he was genuinely really, really pleased for me because he'd seen me from kind of the time when we'd split up, trying to get my confidence back, working in the gym, working my way through it all to then getting this job at Manchester United, which I was hoping would set me on my way in football broadcasting. And I could see that he was genuinely pleased for me. And I saw him do the gig in Watford and there was a huge improvement in him. He was absolutely superb. And then we did this gig in Hammersmith. And again, I've never forgotten it. There was a few celebs there. So I was a little bit uncomfortable. So I kind of kept out of the way. And then he came over with Ricky and we were just having fun, taking the mick out of each other, all that kind of stuff. We went away, did the gig. And I used to always stand with Ricky either in the music mix box, yeah, or just off to the side of stage. Because Ricky had to be ready if anything was to go wrong. Yeah. He had to be ready to jump in. So Ricky was always on standby. So I kind of always stood with Ricky. So we were just off the stage. And I remember at a break in songs, he came over and he said to me, and I've never forgotten this, he said to me, am I doing all right? And I was like, why is he asking me if he's doing all right? So it took me a second to answer. And I said to him, can I just ask, are you enjoying yourself? And he went, yes, mate, I'm having a ball, something like that, words to that effect. And I said to him, mate, that's all that matters. That's all that matters. Don't worry about them. Don't worry about your band. As long as you're having a great time, that's all that matters. And he kind of he didn't say anything. It was almost like there was no acknowledgement, but he gave me a little smile. That's all he gave me, just a wee smile. I can still vividly remember it. And off he went. He did his gig. And that was the last time I saw him.
Oh, long time ago.
So that was about
97, probably?
No, it was after that because I got my deal with MUTV in the summer of 99. So it would have been round about the spring 1999.
Right, okay.
Yeah.
Oh, so he was already fairly established by then as a solo.
He was on his way. He was well on his way. Yeah.
Yeah.
That definitely sounds like Rob, doesn't it? That comment. He often says to us, well, and to other people about it as well, he's got that ability to pick that one negative looking face out in the audience. So it could be someone that's there with a grumpy face, folded arms, maybe they've come with someone else, and he will laser in on them.
And then he'll say...
He'll often pick them out now, won't he? Actually has a bit of fun with it.
So, am I doing okay? You don't look very happy.
Yeah, you're not very happy there. So he plays with it a little bit now, but I think it used to really trouble him when he saw people that weren't enjoying it or having fun.
Not saying that you weren't enjoying it.
No. But that must have been fantastic to see those early on stage, stage presence, just that unbridled, emotional bundle that he still is, really, isn't he? But it's a little bit more measured now these days.
Yeah. So as his success grew as a solo artist, did you ever think that you'd want to swap places with him? No, not
at all.
I didn't think so.
No, not at all. My ship had sailed.
Yeah.
I didn't suit it. I didn't suit being a pop star. I don't know why, but it wasn't made for me, and I wasn't made for it. And it never even entered my mind to try and get a solo deal or anything like that. I remember a couple of years after, I was asked if I'd be interested in joining a band called Caught in the Act, who were huge on the continent, absolutely huge. And I remember having conversations with friends of mine from the record company who were still friends of mine and remain friends to this day, whether I should do it or not. And I remember speaking to their manager about it, and it just wasn't for me. I could feel myself. I wanted to go in a different direction. I wanted to work in football. That's what I wanted to do. And I was very focused on getting into football. I didn't know what angle to go down at that time when I was still working in the gym, whether to be a coach. I was playing semi-professional at the time, so I was actually playing at a really decent level. But I didn't know whether I wanted to go into coaching or whether I wanted to work for a football club in some capacity. I remember writing to a number of Premier League football managers asking if they'd be interested in taking on a health and fitness advisor. And I wondered if I could go down that route. But then when the opportunity to step into television presented itself, that's when I thought, this is what I want to do. I think this is my calling. And I wanted to work predominantly in Scottish football. That was my aim, because my grandfather was a very well-known and respected football journalist in Scotland up until he died. And my uncle, who recently retired, was also a much loved and respected football journalist in Scotland. So I kind of wanted to follow their path and carry on their legacy. So when I got offered the opportunity to step into television, I thought, this is my route to get to where I want to go to. So the thought of stepping back into the music industry was a non-starter. It really was.
Yeah.
Hi, I'm Robbie Williams, and you're listening to Robbie Williams Rewind with the Champions.
And Rob's spoken a lot about the importance of mental health long before most people could even think about talking about it publicly. And thank goodness now it's not such a taboo subject as it used to be.
Yeah.
As I said, I work in the corporate world, and it's something that's really close to my heart. And we have this concept called mental health first aider now.
Okay.
And I do that in the workplace. And so I'm trained to have a conversation with people who may not be feeling quite right, or, you know, all the way through to someone who's actually feeling suicidal, and the types of questions that you can actually ask that person in the moment if needed. Thank goodness I haven't had too many of those. But that whole area of mental health, I mean, as I said, Robbie started talking about it, and he said in the beginning he used to hide his emotions because people would sneer at him, or if he admitted he was depressed or anxious, you know, people would go, well, you know, you're famous, you've got money, and you should be grateful, you should be happy. What are your views on that? I mean, did you meet people who were like that with you? And, you know, how have you found your mental health over the time that you've been in the band to today?
The biggest issue for me was perception. So just because I was in a boy band, the perception was that I was a millionaire.
Yeah.
That I was living in a mansion, that I was driving luxury cars, flying first class. Trust me, that could not be further from the truth. I was earning £800 a month. That's what I was earning. Wow. In 3 years, I earned £18,000. That's it. That's all I got. That's all I made. I only was able to cover my mortgage payments from being in that band. Thankfully, everything was predominantly taken care of for us in terms of hotel stays, food, all that kind of stuff, clothes. But in terms of actually making a living, I was scraping the bottom of the barrel. I really was. And I remember having the conversation with the management saying, I know how much we're turning over because I've kept a record of it. I know how much we earn every gig. So I know what we're turning over on a monthly basis. We want to increase our monthly allowance. And they wouldn't allow it. And I struggled with that. And I started to struggle with that mentally because I couldn't understand why we had to scrape to make a living, considering the amount of work and the amount of hours we were doing. We were entitled to make a comfortable living. Mm-hmm. Now, I'm not saying the type of living that everybody hopes for, where you're unbelievably comfortable and money is no object. I just wanted to make a decent wage. It's all I asked for. So I found that part of it quite troubling. When the band split up, I found myself in a situation where I felt I had no purpose. And I remember there was a period where I would go to bed very late and I would get up very late. And I remember not feeling very well one day and I went to my doctor, and out of nowhere, my doctor said to me, I just got a wee question for you. He says, just out of interest, what time do you get out of bed in the morning? I says, it depends. I said, if I've got something on, I'm out crack of dawn. But if I've got nothing on, 11, sometimes noon. And he went, you're depressed. I went, what? Don't be ridiculous. He went, you're depressed. I said, I'm not depressed at all. And he says, you are. And he says, why are you getting out of bed at 12 o'clock? And he says, I'll tell you why you're getting out of your bed at 12 o'clock. Because it makes you think that your days are shorter. And because you think you've got nothing to get out of bed for. And that was a light bulb moment. Now, I still argue to this day that I don't think I was depressed. I just think I was pissed off. Yeah. But I was like, oh my God, I need to get out of bed because this is ridiculous. I need to set myself goals for the day. Yeah. And that was the moment that, again, I was able to start turning my life around, because I remember the very next day getting out of bed at 8 o'clock in the morning and I went for a run. I got back, I got my football boots, I drove up to the football pitch and I went and did some football training for the next 2 hours. And that was my purpose, to get out of bed. And then I suddenly started thinking, right, you've had enough time now to feel sorry for yourself. Now you've got to crack on. And this is where I feel that I'm absolutely blessed and thankful and fortunate that I have had the mental strength to be able to come through all the adversity that I have faced over my life since the band. And there's been a few, trust me, where I've had to start again and I faced adversity, but I've been able to come through it because I've believed in my own mental capabilities. Yeah. And I'm very, very thankful for that. Even coming through my illness and my divorce, which is probably the hardest thing I've ever had to do, bar none, I've been able to do it on my own. With the support of my very close friends and my brother, I've come through it. But I toyed with getting help. I thought about it. And in the end, I decided against it because I felt that I was strong enough as a person to be able to deal with it and cope with it. And again, I allow myself a pat on the back for being able to do that. So I've been, again, very, very fortunate where I have not suffered from any sort of mental health issues. I haven't suffered from any sort of depression. So I've been very, very lucky. So I wouldn't really know how to answer the question because I've never really been in that situation. And I think, to be completely transparent, I think it would be very wrong of me to say to people who are suffering from depression or mental health issues how to cope with it. Because you have to find your own individual path. to how to cope with it and how to deal with it and how to get better. For me, that's the most important aspect, is how do you get better? Can you do it on your own? If you can, great. If you have to get help, for God's sake, get help.
Yeah.
People, my friends were pleading with me to get help. And it wasn't because I didn't want the help. I just felt it was something I needed to do on my own.
Yeah.
And yeah, I think I've done okay.
Yeah.
Yeah. It sounds like you've got a very strong inner resilience that probably started very early in your life, I would suggest.
Yeah,
not knowing you well, but
yeah, Matt, resilience is a good word. I've never really thought of it like that, but I am resilient. I don't really allow things to get on top of me. I've never allowed things to get on top of me, because what I've always worried about is if something does get on top of me, how I would cope with it. So I've never really had that experience. I've always gone, right, pick yourself up, dust yourself down, let's go again. Yeah. We can either go two ways here. You've got a choice. This is where I think I'm very lucky, because I gave myself a choice.
yeah.
The choice was get on with it, reinvent yourself again, start again. You've got so many opportunities out there. The world is now your oyster. Or you can choose to let it eat away at you, get at you, frustrate you, annoy you, and piss you off.
Yep.
If I went down that route, I worry what would happen.
Yeah.
So I always go the other way.
Thank you.
And I think you've got two sons, have you?
Yeah, two wee boys.
So,
yeah.
what would you say to them if they wanted to get into music or something where they might end up being famous?
Oh, good Lord, that's a great question that I've never even thought about. To be honest with you, you know, their mum and I are very much on the same hymn sheet when it comes to what they want to do.
Mm-hmm.
As far as we're concerned, they also have to make their own choices in life. We can guide them and we can advise them and we can point them in the right direction and do what every parent does. But at the end of the day, they have to make their own choices. Lennox desperately wants to be a professional football player. I can see it in him already, which I love about him. So I'm just helping him and guiding him and just doing what I can. And if he gets to a level where he might get scouted or he might get seen, we deal with that at the time. At the moment, all I want him to do is enjoy his football, because he's only 11 coming up to 12. Just enjoy your football, mate. And all I want him to do is just improve. I keep saying to him, every time you go on the pitch, do better than the last time you were on the pitch. Every time you train, work a little bit harder than you did in your last training session, but just enjoy it. That's all I want you to do. When you come home, I want you to tell me how much you enjoyed training. Don't give me anything negative, nothing like that. Just tell me how much you enjoyed it. Harvey's still far too young. He's only 8. He'll be 9 in a couple of weeks. But them stepping into the music industry, holy crap. I don't know. I don't know. Look, whatever choice they decide,
Yeah.
I will, their mum and I will always support them, always. And we will do what we can as parents to make sure that they've chosen the right path.
Yeah.
So until that day comes, I pray to God that all he wants to do is play for Aberdeen.
So we're on our way to beginning to wrap up now, Ally, but a few more questions before we do. You've alluded to it a few times through the interview, but bring us up to date. What happened? What did you end up doing after the band? You've mentioned a few things that you've done, but what did you end up doing and where are you now? I'm sure our listeners would be keen to hear that.
Okay, so currently I live in Austria. Mm-hmm. So the reason that I'm in Austria is because up until I got divorced, I married an Austrian girl. So we set up home here after we lived abroad. So I lived in Singapore for a number of years and I lived in Qatar for a number of years. But due to the global pandemic, unfortunately, I lost my job, which meant we had to move back to the family home here in Austria. So that's what I do now. So I run my YouTube channels. I do PR and communications. I host events. I do a number of different things. I'm a bit of a free spirit at the moment, which I'm really, really enjoying. But when I stepped out of the band, as I said, went into the gym, worked there for a number of years, and then I got offered an opportunity to step into television. So what I did was I went to a channel called Granada Shop, which was a shopping channel that sold all the items from the old Littlewoods catalogue. And they wanted a health and fitness advisor to come on to show people how to use the equipment and the benefits of using the equipment. So I got that through a friend of mine, and that was the best learning curve that I had in television. And I would recommend anybody who wants to step into television to try and get onto a shopping channel, because it's a fantastic way to learn the trade, because you have nowhere to hide. Now, if I can talk for 1 minute about a white cotton pair of socks, I think I can talk for 1 minute about a game of football. So it's where I learned how to take instructions from an earpiece that you have to wear. So you have to take instructions from the director, from the producer. The shows are counted down to the second. The items are counted down to the second. So you know if you've only got 10 seconds left, you've got to ad lib for 10 seconds. It was the perfect grounding for me. And then very luckily, I got spotted by a producer from MUTV, Manchester United Television, who thought that I'd be perfect for a youth magazine show that they were about to launch. Auditioned for that, got the job. And then while I was doing that job, I kind of worked my way up the ranks at Manchester United Television and ended up hosting their magazine programs, their phone-in shows, presenting the news. And again, from there, I progressed to other work, got a gig on TalkSport Radio, presented on Sky Sports News for a while. And then I got offered a job up in Glasgow to go and work for the now defunct Setanta Sports. So I worked in Glasgow for 3 years. And again, I got very lucky. I got spotted by a producer who was the executive producer for ESPN Star Sports out in Singapore. Asked me if I'd be interested in going out there and presenting their Premier League and Champions League coverage. So jumped at the chance, moved out there, was there for 7 years. And then I got offered the opportunity to move to Qatar, and worked in Qatar for 7 years as well as a senior football producer. So while I was in Singapore, I took the difficult decision to step away from presenting and work behind the scenes. So I became a producer because I felt it would give me more longevity in the industry, and started producing live studio shows in and around live football matches. And that's what I did while I was in Qatar. I was in Australia last year producing the Women's World Cup for a sports broadcaster called Optus Sports. And yeah, I still dip my toe in now and then. I really enjoy it. I love it, to be honest with you. I only want to go freelance now, so I'm not interested in being employed by anybody. So if there's opportunities to continue producing, I absolutely would consider it. So yeah, I've been very, very lucky, guys, that I've been able to sort of build a career for myself out with the band and been very, very happy, and now able to have a really good laugh about the band and talk openly about my experience, whereas before I would kind of shy away from it.
Yeah.
Wow, what a journey.
Yeah.
And we ask all our guests this question, so it's a standard question. Do you have a favourite Robbie song?
Yes, I do. And I know it's going to, it's not the obvious, you know, it is the Back for Good one.
Oh,
Ah.
yeah.
I just love it. I love the tongue-in-cheek feel to it, and the fact that he's just ripping the piss. That's what I love about it. And for me, it kind of epitomized Rob at the time. I keep calling him Rob like he's a pal of mine. He's not, you know.
We call him Rob as well.
Yeah,
so,
yeah.
you know.
Sorry, because I've not seen Robbie for many, many years, and I would doubt hugely if he'd have a single clue who I am. If we ever bumped into each other in the street. But I just loved that version of Back for Good that he did. I just loved it.
Yeah, I prefer it to hearing the original version of Back for Good.
Yeah.
When I
Yawn.
take that
Yeah.
live. Yeah.
Yawn.
Yeah, yeah, exactly. I'm like, oh, come on. Yeah, they actually went and performed that with him at the Brits.
Did they?
Yeah, well, in 2016, he won his Brit Icon Award, and Take
did
That
he?
came on and presented it to him, and they sung that version with him.
Ah,
It came
cool.
full circle.
So that was pretty cool. And that's the last
Very
time he
cool.
ever did it, I think. Yeah,
Very cool.
it was a
Good
good
for him.
moment. Yeah. And then do you have a favourite album or video of Robbie's?
The video is the one where he's in the bodysuit and he has to rip it all off.
Oh, yeah.
Rock DJ.
Rock DJ.
Rock DJ, yeah. Because Ricky told me that he... now, I don't know how much of this is true, and I must admit, I did think Ricky told me this with his tongue placed firmly in his cheek, but he told me that Rob did walk home from the studio in that suit.
There is a video of him wearing it along the street.
So it's true.
It's true.
Yeah.
Yeah. And then a police car drives past and he kind of freaks out and sort of
No way,
hides.
really?
Yeah. Yeah.
So it's true.
It's true.
Oh, man,
Yeah.
I love that.
Yeah. Yeah.
Brilliant.
Oh. And will you be going to see his film that's coming out soon? So his biopic Better Man is coming out in a few weeks. I'm not sure when it's coming out in Austria. Do you know? It's
remember.
Boxing Day here in the UK. I know that.
Is
much.
it? Okay. No, I watched his documentary, the documentary that he had out recently.
Yeah.
I watched that, which I again found quite compelling, quite fascinating. And yeah, if I get an opportunity to watch it, absolutely I will. No danger. Yeah.
Yeah.
Just a warning. He's a CGI monkey in this film. So
CGI monkey.
one of my friends contacted me today and he said, Matt, I saw the trailer for Better Man and I wasn't sure. I didn't know it was going to be like that. So Michael Gracie's had this idea to actually portray Robbie as a monkey because I think in the interviews they have joke about it, don't they? He said to Rob, you know, what animal do you see yourself as? And Rob said a tiger, I think. Lion. And Michael went, no. What animal do you really see yourself as? And he went, a monkey. You know, kind of like
He sees himself as a performing monkey.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
You know, I think it comes back from back in the day, you know, when he was.
Yeah.
And
I can relate to that.
But from what we haven't seen it yet, but from what we hear, it works very well. You know, it's Michael Gracie who was the director of Greatest Showman. So he wanted something different, and apparently from the people that we have seen, it works really well. But yeah, it's going to be a bit different.
All right, great. I'll look out for that. 100% I will.
Yeah. So, Ali, it's been a delight to have you on the show. Thank you so much.
Thank you for having me on. Really enjoyed it.
We hope everyone's enjoyed hearing your boy band experiences. And to hear similar discussions from you and other pop stars, please let our listeners and watchers know where they can find you and your amazing show, The Accidental Pop Star, on social media.
So I'm on Facebook, The Accidental Pop Star. We're on Twitter, The Accidental Pop Star, or The Accidental P Star, I think it's called on Twitter, or X. And the YouTube channel is simply called The Accidental Pop Star. So I've not had any content on there for the past 12 months because I've been going through this illness. But we will be relaunching the channel early next year, and we will be bringing brand new content for you.
We look forward to that.
Thank you. We look forward to that. I've recently been listening to the Nick Kershaw, Richie Neville, Chesney Hawkes, Tony Hadley. Lucy might have listened to a few more than
I've
me
listened
as
to
well.
all the 90s.
Really been enjoying that.
90s ones,
Great.
yeah.
I'm glad you enjoyed it. Thank you.
Yeah. Well, Ali, it's been a pleasure having you on.
Yeah.
Thank you for spending so much time with us. I know you've got a live broadcast this evening, so we won't keep you too much longer, but thank you for coming on the show, and we look forward to maybe seeing you in the future at some point.
Yeah.
Thank you, guys. I've really enjoyed it. It's been an absolute pleasure.
Thanks.
Thanks.
Take care.
Bye.
Bye.
Robbie Williams Rewind.